this maybe is a bit of a controversial point, like, do you really want to manage? Just asking themselves that quite honest question, it will help them be the right type of manager, because they do actually really want to do it.
It's not about you, make it about your team. So ask a few questions, listen a lot, find out about the roles, what they do, how great they are and what their challenges are. Uncover them rather than talk about yourself.
Sometimes you see the work person and the person outside of work as two separate things. But actually, I think the truest form, particularly in management, is actually if people go back to how maybe they operate outside of work.
Hello, I'm Millie Gladstone and welcome to Sparks, a series by Cegos. We're sparking conversations about work and life, and today I'm delighted to be joined by two of my colleagues, Ken Govan and Emily Link. Welcome.
Hi, Millie.
Thank you so much for having us, Mills.
You're so welcome. Must be your third time on the podcast now, Em?
Maybe. I do apologise. It's always a pleasure to be a guest on the show. I'm looking forward to it, particularly being alongside Ken today.
Me too.
It's gonna
Should be fun.
Excellent. Thank you both. All right. So we're here. Both of our guests sit at director level here at Cegos UK. Very exciting. Just before we start then, actually, let's take a look, as we are talking about management today, how you got to be in those management positions. What are the career highlights? How did you get there? Go on, Em, we'll start with you.
How did I get there? It's probably a good question, actually. I'm not sure how I got here. If we're talking about particularly the context of this organisation, I think I came in at a really interesting point when we were on a trajectory of growth, which means there were lots of opportunities to take advantage of ownership of different clients. We were growing maybe our people, and that meant that when asked to step up, I stupidly put my hand up and said, yes, I will step up. Whether I was ready or not is probably another question. But yeah, there was opportunities given to me, which I seized at the time and said yes to. And yeah, the rest is history, really. I think we've been on quite a journey as an organisation. So it's exciting to now be at this level. But yeah, still look back and think, how?
How? Love that. Thank you. And I think something that you said there about whether you're quite ready or not, we'll come back to a bit later.
Yes.
But talking about the journey and talking about growth, Ken, you of course join us from Cegos, which is the latest step in, well, the artist formerly known as IW's journey. So tell us about how you came to be a director.
Well, you made me think about this when I saw the notes ahead of our conversation.
Always
and
good.
Actually, my first management job, and I was managing a sales team when I was 25. And I think one of the advantages of coming into it at that age is you don't really know. And it's not quite so scary. You just think, hey, great, I'll go for it. So I've been managing people for a long time. There were periods when I was SME with no team amongst that. And then when I came in and joined Cegos, I've had various management, team management and director level roles across various functions. So it's been quite a long journey, sometimes as a people manager, sometimes not, sometimes managing other things within organisations. But it's always challenging and fun.
Fabulous. So ignorance is bliss is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it was.
Number one.
Then
Can't be scared of what you don't know yet, right?
Very true. Very true.
Perfect. Okay, so you talked about some challenges maybe you've had as a manager. I'm not particularly going to ask about that on the podcast today, but I'm interested in seeing, considering you are both directors, you've got experience being managers, probably managing other people managers as well, thinking about how if there are those more experienced people managing people and they want to upskill or get better, that's sort of the route I'm going to take us down today, if that sounds good to you. So thinking about the outcomes more than the challenges themselves, maybe, what we learned. So
Sounds good.
How do you, in your roles now, continue to spark your own learning? Ken, I'll come to you first.
Okay. I think we're in quite a lucky position because we're in the learning business. And every time you're with clients in a room, when you're talking about management, leadership, change, whatever it is, you never stop thinking about, oh, right, what about me and my people and my team? And you just reflect back on that. So I think one of the number one places to go is looking at what's around you and taking a little step back in your own organisation and saying, what do I see here? what's working, what's not, learning from others around you, because that's seeing great practice or maybe some practice that's not so great. And how do you learn from that? That's number one. Then there's a whole world of out into the internet and podcasts and books and everywhere else to go with thought leaders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So actually working with what you've got at the moment, looking around you, seeing what's working, what's not, what could be improved. Yeah. Fabulous. Similar?
Very similar. I would definitely agree. I think it's always a reminder when we're delivering programs around management, whether it's emerging managers or experienced managers, to think about you and your team and think about, sometimes you're like, okay, I'm not doing that right now. I must go back and have those conversations, whether it's around feedback or setting goals for them. But obviously there's always a way to get football into a podcast. So I think whilst there is a lot to learn from the organisational context, I think I do also learn a lot from playing football. I think I've been definitely on the receiving end of not fantastic management, when communication hasn't been clear, maybe feedback hasn't been given, and been within a team and kind of felt that on the receiving end, or having to have some difficult conversations with people when they are upset or emotional because they're not getting that clarity or that honesty from those people that maybe are making the decisions, and whether that's around playing time or not performing, like in a particular game, for example, and there's just a silence. And I think when you're like on peer-to-peer level with that, you can feel that frustration.
Yeah.
And I think on the flip side, when I've seen managers in that context do really well, it's when, yes, okay, you're having to make some difficult decisions sometimes, give feedback, help people perform, but you do it with clarity and kindness. And actually, you then don't have as many of those frustrations. People are still, of course, wanting to play, but they maybe understand more, they feel listened to and valued. And I think there's a lot I've learned maybe just being on that kind of peer-to-peer level that makes me think about sometimes the way our team communicates and the way we work together.
Clarity and kindness. I like that. That's really interesting, actually. So when you're on the football team, if you are maybe, because of your position as being someone who is a manager, who goes out to some of our fabulous clients like Savills and Airbus and all the rest of them, delivering these management programs, how do you react in that moment where you're receiving maybe from somebody in the football realm management that isn't that good?
I think that we have, like mentioned, been on the receiving end of poor management. And when I have witnessed that, sometimes it's like seeing what happens as a result of that. But we have had some difficult conversations being a voice for the team. But as a group of captains, we've sat down with that manager to give some feedback, to give them an opportunity to learn. A bit like you might in a program do a 360, get some feedback to say, look, these are some areas maybe to improve or to develop, and to see how they respond to that. And in some cases, managers within the football context have responded really well to that and said, okay, brilliant, it's great to get this feedback. Others have turned around and said, well, I didn't ask for any of this. Like, I'm here to call the shots, and you said you were going to give feedback at Christmas or at the end of the year, whereas it's maybe come sooner because there's a feeling of discontent within the squad. And usually in that latter example, it hasn't gone so well, and they haven't maybe thought about how they could improve, because I think that feedback, holding that mirror up to them, has been a little bit too honest, and they haven't thought about maybe what they're going to do next to maybe change and get people back on board. Because I think once you lose people and their belief in you, then it's very hard to continue to ask them to perform and put their best forward. Yeah. Definitely. Sorry, it took me a while to get back to the question there.
No, fabulous answer though, so it was worth it.
I think you make a really interesting point when it comes to that difference we see in, as you come up the levels of or experience as a leader, the more senior you become in the organisation, almost more you're having to manage up and have those tougher conversations and be able to position that conversation well. Whether people receive it well because they're very experienced leaders, not always. But that's part of your responsibility and what you take on when you come into those roles. So.
Yeah, definitely. You're quite right. Being the advocate for your team is definitely an important part. So if we have got some managers who are experienced, looking to improve themselves, where should they go? What's their first step? What would you recommend? Go on, Ken.
Well, you get into the world of understanding yourself. So is it a diagnostic tool? Do you look at some of those? Do you look at 360 that's there? Or are you looking wider outside your industry and thinking, who do I admire and what are they doing? So the first step is make a decision to do that. step and say, do I want to look inside myself? Do I want to get the feedback from someone else? Then decide what is that and start acting on it. It's not the only way to develop. Someone else can help you. Many senior leaders have a coach, and oftentimes their role is to just let that person find their way to get there.
Yeah. There might be some mentors as well that I'm thinking often it's about what kind of manager would you like to be? And that feels often quite authentic to you. And I think as people progress in their management role, yes, they might have some of the fundamentals in place around management, but they're starting to think about, okay, well, how do I want to empower my team? How do I want to be seen by them? And they're starting to think about how they show up, not just the practicalities of, some of the skills that we might have on a more emerging managers program, but they're thinking about like their mindset.
Yeah, okay, so they've maybe got those foundational skills, and actually now they're reflecting their values more, maybe, and how they want to be a leader. So whether that's from looking internally, looking externally in other industries. I like what you said there, Ken. And that brings me very neatly onto my next question. I've been reading a book by Herminia Ibarra, I hope I pronounced that right, called Act Like a Leader, Think Like a Leader. Have you guys read that one?
I haven't read that one. Would you recommend?
Yes, I would so far.
Okay.
So one of the points that she makes quite early on is that a lot of the kind of theories that we read around leadership advocate for kind of what you touched on, Ken, about, and actually you as well, about knowing yourself, knowing what your values are before you can then lead others. She actually argues the other way around. So she says that we can't be self-aware until we have something kind of externally that changes, and we go on that journey of learning more about ourselves. So I was just curious to hear your thoughts, because I think, in that instance, she's quite right. Often we are told you have to look inside and figure out who you are before you can lead, but we don't necessarily think about how we become self-aware. We think about, 360 tools and getting feedback from other people. So as an exercise of kind of pure introspection, what would you recommend?
Ask someone to give you a nudge in that direction. And so yes, absolutely, a role of a leader can be put some conditions in place that someone can change their habits. Then they can learn from that. And their habits have already changed and they've improved their leadership behaviours. Great. But that's someone else putting those conditions in place.
Yeah.
So how do you find those sparks for you to get going? Ask someone else. Get a few pieces of opinion there that help you along the way.
I like you dropped in sparks there, Ken. That was very clever from you.
So on brand.
But yeah, no, I agree. I think it's interesting. Like sometimes you see the work person and the person outside of work as two separate things. Or maybe people feel they need to be someone different when they're in work. But actually, I think the truest form, particularly in management, is actually if people go back to how maybe they operate outside of work. Like, yes, okay, there's a job to be done. But I think if you know yourself and what you stand for outside, like that you value relationships, that you want people to develop and progress, like genuinely in life outside, like you're a champion for your friends or your partner or whoever, then I think you can be that person. You don't need to be someone different at work. Like you can be that person in those things that you value outside, help you become a better manager in work. Like leaning into those more, I think, rather than thinking you have to be a particular manager when you're in the work context.
Yeah.
Being truer to yourself. And usually the people that are the most honest, like we do a lot of insights or psychometrics, and this is you on a piece of paper. And people sometimes are like, wow, how did you get inside my head? Or did you follow me around for a week? Because they suddenly have an awareness. And then if there's anything that they usually disagree with on their report, I say, well, you could, of course, go and ask your team, do they see some of this stuff like act out, in everyday life? And they're like, okay. And I'm like, or you could, ask your friends and family, because they all be really honest. And, people have come back the next day and said, I showed it to, my partner at home. And they said, oh, finally, someone's told you about those things. That's really good. I'm pleased someone's written it down. It's like, oh, okay. Moment of realization.
Yeah.
Because I think those people outside of work are really honest. That's where we show up most naturally. And I think the more you can bring of that to your work context, then the more authentic you are in your management.
For sure, yeah.
And you've also relied on some of those habits and traits to get you to where you are at that point. And some of those can become limiting beliefs. So it's useful to understand what are the mental models that are going on. I'm this type of manager. I'm this type of leader. what's the downside of that then? If that's not so great, what do you like about that? You lean into, that you stay there rather than make that change. I think that's quite tough to do yourself, though. I think that's a useful time to get some help.
You just made me think as well. I think, I know this slightly strays a bit away from the self-awareness, but I think within organizations and cultures, people think that management is a certain person because that's how they've experienced management. And actually, I think one of the biggest levers to pull, or like something that unlocks, is when they realize they don't have to emulate the management style that they've had within an organization, particularly like some of the organizations that we work with that might be quite hierarchical and quite traditional. When they realize, actually, I don't need to be like the person that manages me. I can be slightly different to that. I can be more genuine to my style. Then I think they find like a superpower, because they're like, oh, this is so much easier. Like, there's less energy required to do this.
Yeah, it's so true. It takes a lot of effort trying to be someone that you're not, right? And you're probably actually not going to get very good outcomes from it either, because you're focusing on doing that rather than actually just managing someone in a way that feels natural to you.
And it's really tough because for those more senior roles, the balance between management and leadership is shifting all the time. So you're becoming more of a leader, less of a manager. The leadership requires much more relational approach. So if you're not your genuine self, that's pretty tough to do.
So did either of you have a kind of moment that comes to mind where you think, okay, I remember that is when I decided what type of leader or what type of manager I wanted to be? Or do you think it's been more of a natural progression because you have just kind of been yourself?
Yeah, I don't know if it was one particular moment or whether it was just the kind of resignation over time that I thought, oh, this is just who I am.
25-year-old
The more you
Ken
really
with the
try
sales
and
team.
change, I'm a big fan of the Blanchard organisation and the SL2 model. And while I'm pretty flexible as a leader, I know I'm very much the delegating, supportive leader.
Yeah.
I like people having the freedom and to carry on and do things and go there. And I really struggle with the directive, like the strongly directive approach, which is necessary sometimes. And there's a point when I just accepted, well, that's who I am. I'm going to work hard at that part. And I know when I got to be that. I still don't find much joy in that.
But you have to do it sometimes.
So it was more evolution, I think, for me.
Yeah. I'm just reflecting back. I did a program called Teach First, which means you're a leader at the age of 23, which feels quite ridiculous, really, and a bit of a joke. You're on a leadership development pathway. But I think stepping into the classroom, that you had to have that ability to take control and to lead, like at that time, an unruly group of teenagers that probably didn't want to be there. But actually, I think one of the reasons I left teaching was my mentor at the time, who was absolutely brilliant. Shout out Mr. Kettle. What a name. But he said, like, possibly you care too much, which sounds almost like it's a bit of a dig. But he was saying, like, the fact that you take so much of it home, like, you really do think about these kids. He was like, the education context is really tough at the moment. Like, and obviously we need teachers that really, really care. But to care about like 300 people that you see each week is a lot. And shout out to all the teachers still doing that, because they are incredible. But I think like the type of leader, I wanted that to be a strength, not something that held me back and exhausted me after a week, that I cared too much about those individuals and wanted them to succeed. So it's actually to have a team now of like, within a smaller organization means you can really care about people and you can like develop them and you can have relationships with them, which is less exhausting than looking after 300 students each week, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And having that smaller team you can focus on, probably get a bit more personalised in how you talk to each of them as well, rather than a bit of a blanket approach for 300. And you have to fill your own cup before you can pour into anyone else's, don't you? They
put your own oxygen mask on first.
Own oxygen, exactly. Fab. All right. So thinking about maybe some newer managers then that are coming in to the scene of management, what piece of advice would you give them? They were coming in their first week. It's a big question, I know.
It's a big question. Piece of advice in your first week.
Got a few little thoughts. I think, first of all, and this maybe is a bit of a controversial point, like, do you really want to manage? I think there's there's lots of organizational structures where to progress, you have to manage people, rightly or wrongly. I think that is, and I've always been a little bit conflicted by this because I know some organizations have now set up progression routes where you can become a technical expert. But I mean, a lot of the people that I talk to that are managers still all struggle with letting go. Like, it's like they're making a conscious decision to develop others, to give feedback. It's not like that's all they want to do. But I really struggle with having those two routes. But I completely understand why some organizations are setting them like up as those different routes for progression. But I think it comes back to like it still being a choice that you want to manage, not just because you want to climb a career ladder. Like, do you want to, you know, have your team call you at various points to ask your advice, you know, to tell you about their frustrations, to help them and support them, because it's a different job role to doing the job itself that you've maybe become really good at doing. And are you okay to let go of various things? Because you will be their lived experience of the day to day if you do take on that responsibility as their manager. So asking yourself, like, do you really want to do this? And that's not to say, I'm sure like in their first week they've signed up and they've said, yeah, like we're ready for it. But just asking themselves that quite honest question, because I think it will help them be the right type of manager, because they do actually really want to do it.
I'm really fascinated by this topic at the moment. I feel like I'm seeing and reading a lot about it, because you're so right. It is such a step up and it's such a different skill set to manage someone. And like you say, you do have to let go, which can be hard if you're someone that takes pride in your work and likes getting, you know, feedback and praise and whatever, to suddenly be part of, you know, a team and push your team forward for that recognition instead can be a bit daunting and tricky. I don't know what the solution is.
No. But you're very good at it, Mills. Like I have seen like, just to flip the table here.
Is that allowed?
Yeah, Millie Gladstone. Like, I know that you are incredibly good at what you do, but you also have consciously, well, I think like from observing you, like you've consciously decided that we've had some huge projects over the years whilst you've been at the helm. You have had to lead and not necessarily do. So like manage others and take the time, because you know you can't physically do everything within the time scales that maybe a client might want something back, i.e. yesterday. So rather than do it yourself, which I know you'd be incredibly competent at doing, you've had to say, no, I need to make sure that I'm taking the time to set others up for success, not go back and then also do their revisions and corrections, but give them the feedback so they work out what needs to change for them to keep supporting on this project. I don't know that's fair.
Yeah.
But I think
that's nice. Yeah, I guess it's managing a project, which some of those skills, I guess, in people management are kind of similar. I guess there's not quite the same burden of responsibility necessarily of actually kind of growing people. I guess you kind of do through that process a little bit, but it's not as formal, maybe.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, interesting.
I think that people management part as well is, if you're in that first week, it's not about you. Make it about your team. So ask a few questions, listen a lot, find out about the roles, what they do, how great they are and what their challenges are. Uncover them rather than talk about yourself, because you're rightly pretty insecure when you go into that first management position. Because I don't know about you, Em, but all the time we see people go into the first management role with absolutely no development of what are the core skills for being a manager. So you kind of just thrown in and swimming. So try and stay above the water and let someone else do the paddling.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So get to know the team, find out what makes them tick a bit first before you then can actually figure out how to even start managing them.
A lot of times you got there because you're a problem solver.
Yeah.
You're great at what you do.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to stop being a problem solver and to allow other people to solve the problems and make yourself indispensable as the SME. But indispensable as the people leader.
Yeah, I like that. So do you think, because there's a lot of stats around, you know, one of the top reasons people often want to leave their jobs is because they've got a bad manager. Do you think we have a duty as managers to do a good job?
Of course. It's a huge part of people's lives. And so we spend a lot of our time at work, and who's got the most impact on you and your role? Yeah, your line manager. So if you can change how that person is performing, make them more valuable to themselves, to their organisation, back in their family life, and feel better, about their career and their performance, then that's a pretty big responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's always banded around like how many people leave jobs because of their managers, but then on the flip side, how many people stay because of their managers. Like,
Yeah.
I think we sometimes see it as like we worry about not being a good enough manager, and people worry maybe don't have the skills like or the competency to be really great at that. But on the flip side, like when it does go really well, like it is, you see people grow and you do remember. I mean, I'm sure if I asked both of you to reflect back on a manager that had a really great, that you remember those people, because of something they did at a particular time, or their consistency, or the fact they were always accessible, or the relationship you built with them. Like those people stay in your mind, not just those ones that maybe aren't great. There's brilliant managers out there.
Yeah. There's the other side of the coin, right? For every bad stat, there's the good stat.
Yeah. Often the thing that's not shouted about as much.
Yeah, so true. And so for those new managers coming in, we've spoken a little bit there, Ken, about the shift to being kind of the problem solver at a certain point when the team needs you, to actually stepping back, being able to let the team get on and call on you as and when needed. How do you think you kind of balance that new mindset with also getting your job done? Because you also have responsibilities, right?
Well, the management part is about efficiency and effectiveness, isn't it? Rather than the leadership part. So Drucker's, his mantra was about management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. So it's a lot about process efficiency and getting things set up. It might be running quite well already when you come in as a team, so maybe not try and change everything straight away, but let things evolve and develop and get people involved in it. And people are at different places. So as a manager, you've got to recognise the capability and the commitment attitude of the individuals that you're working with, and they're not all in the same place. So how do you deal with them as individuals to get things done?
Got to meet them where they are.
I think also that those people are there to work alongside you. So if you can flip your day, so you think about what you delegate first to them, to give them the most time, and for you to think about how you set them up for success, and then you are available. And it's that is ultimately your job, to kind of provide that work for others and give that trust to them so that they can develop. And that's ultimately what someone did for us at one point. They looked at their many things on their to-do list and thought, you know what, maybe Em could have a stab at this. And I'm sure I didn't get it right first, second or third time, but they gave me the feedback so that I learned from it. And that's ultimately how you build those relationships.
Yeah.
It's also worth a reality check that for most managers, they've also got their own responsibilities, which they're delivering on. It's not only about leading the team and managing the team to deliver through on that. So the awareness of what's your priorities here and how do you set up your time management at the beginning.
Yeah. You've still got the same number of hours in the day, right? But you've suddenly got loads more responsibilities, plus the responsibilities you already had.
Yep.
So at that point, you need a team, right? To delegate to.
That's what they're there for.
All right. So obviously we are an L&D agency. How are we helping our clients in the management space at the moment?
Well, I think it's at all levels. I mean, what we hear is consistently about what are the core management skills that are needed in our organisations. And then as you move up the levels, you identify that it's different. What's the tougher conversations you've got to have? How do you think more strategically and deliver that message through the organisation as you get to there? And I think it's evolved more into a place of what's the right fit for the organisational culture and climate at that time, and making sure that you're working on the right things rather than just everything.
Yeah. It's actually one of my favourite requests to get is if a client of ours is saying like we'd like to invest in our managers, because I think it is the biggest lever to pull. If they were going to affect like a culture within an organisation and give a population some skills and some confidence, then I would always say start with your managers, because they're so receptive and they're like, oh yeah, we've been trying to work out this and now there's a language around it, some tools, some process. So we often help them define, like you mentioned, Ken, like what is it that you want your managers to do? Like what are the behaviours you want to see? And then we're a huge advocate of trying to make those sessions as interactive as possible. So whether it's involving actors to actually put the skills into practice, no one is usually in your one-to-one conversation by the very nature of it being a one-to-one. So to have a bit of role play, we call it a simulation because the actors are acting, but the managers are just being themselves. Which just gives them often the confidence that they're doing all the right things, so they can go away and have their conversations with their team, knowing that they're saying the right words, listening, asking the right questions. 90% of the time, it's like, keep doing that. And maybe there's a few little things to think about, and they learn from each other in that context. Because I think the management piece, it's often around the confidence and the skills. And that's hopefully, it's not just theory, right? It's actually doing it. We've probably learned most of our management lessons from things that haven't gone so well.
For sure.
And plus, nothing's ever as bad as the actors, right?
No. They can
They're
really
paid to make it bad.
Yeah, they can pitch it very difficult if they need to.
Yeah. I think the layer over that is then about how do you make it stick in the workplace, so that they've got support provided through a learning pathway. But a really important person in that pathway is, guess who? It's their line manager.
Yeah.
And often they're missed out of that development pathway. So what support are you putting in place for those people so they know what their people are going through? What should I be seeing them working on now? And how can they help them along that way as part of that pathway?
Yeah. Make it sticky. Carry on the learning. Fantastic. All right. Final question from me then. Talking about the management kind of sessions that we run for some of our clients. What's one of the most common questions you get asked about management in those sessions? Maybe things people are struggling with.
Difficult conversations.
Yeah, I was going to say difficult, courageous, tricky, honest. You can brand it whatever you want to brand it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and over again, even people who are somewhat outwardly confident about it, when you see it in reality, how they're doing that and stepping into it, maybe you don't see the evidence of. It's a regular practice, day-to-day occurrence for them, that they can have those tougher conversations. They don't have it in their backpack that they can just pull out and automatically have that conversation and maybe really genuine and helpful with that conversation. So yeah, as one thing to work on, it's always there as an anchor piece. The other one, of course, is change and helping your people through change.
Yes.
Change management.
Yeah. I'd agree.
Thank you both for joining me this morning. It's been a lovely conversation that we've had. Thank you for sharing your expertise, and thank you for watching. We'll have another episode next week. Make sure you hit like and subscribe so you get the alert for when the next episode is out. See you soon.